I'm like a crazy old soldier fighting a war all my own.
Good morning, I'm Pat Thurston.
Just me.
Russ Baker is here in studio with me. He is the author of Family of Secrets, The Bush Dynasty, America's Invisible Government, and the Hidden History of the Last 50 Years. Remember the title of the book, Family of Secrets. We all need to get this book. We all need to read this book. We all need to understand what's really been going on in our government over the past several decades. 80-80-810 is our telephone number, 808-0810. And I wanted to talk with... Where'd he go? Oh, Steve. Steve calling from Palo Alto. Hey, Steve, welcome to KGO.
Thank you. On the Dan Rather thing, around the time that happened, there was a movie that I saw. Actually, it was an older movie. It was shown on TV. It was called Primary Instinct or something like that. And the plot of the movie is about a young political reporter who's on the trail of a corrupt politician. And someone gives him a letter that implicates the politician. And he goes public with the letter, and then it's found that the letter is phony. And even though the politician is corrupt, the reporter is completely discredited and loses his career.
Ah.
And
Interesting.
I saw that, and I said, well, if Karl Rove saw that movie, that's the plot of the Dan Rather letter.
Primary Instinct, huh? I have to check that out.
It starred I think, Judd Nelson, one of the guys that was in the teen movies when he was older.
Yeah. Fascinating. And, you know, it just seems like there is no end to their sneakiness. Karl Rove, I mean, he was a master of sneakiness. He is a master of sneakiness. Witness his book and its success.
Well, you know,
and his appearance on Fox News.
One of the things that Rove was involved with was many years ago, he had a... by the way, you know how he got his start?
College?
Well, he was involved with dirty tricks in the college Republicans, and this was brought to the attention of the then chairman of the Republican National Committee, a man named George H.W. Bush, who then was going to investigate this wrongdoing, and he concluded that Karl Rove had done nothing wrong, and then he hired Karl Rove as his assistant.
Isn't that a riot?
Yeah. But I want to tell you a little quick story about Karl Rove. He was running a candidate for governor in the 1980s who was behind the Democrat. They were going to have one final debate, but it didn't look like there was any hope for his candidate. And then suddenly Karl Rove discovers a bug in his office. And he says, hey, there's a bug here. And they call in the FBI and they have a press conference. Who could have planted the bug? The Democratic candidate is so rattled that at the debate that night he performs terribly and he loses.
And the person who planted the bug was Karl himself.
Well, we don't know who it was, but the FBI concluded that it was probably not an outside party because it was the wrong kind of bug. It didn't even have any kind of battery life or anything. It was just totally ineffective.
Unbelievable. You know, you've talked about Karl Rove, but you haven't said anything about Dick Cheney. Would you like to tell us anything about Dick Cheney?
Well, there's a very interesting aspect involving after Nixon is pushed out of office, and we could have talked much more about what happened to him, but when they managed to get him out, Jerry Ford was ginned up to take over, and Jerry Ford comes in as president, and he starts kind of battling with these same forces, but he knows a fellow named Donald Rumsfeld, who he knew who had been in Congress with him, so he brings Rumsfeld in, and Rumsfeld brings in this young fellow named Dick Cheney. Now we're 30 years ago, and so Rumsfeld is the chief of staff, and then he decides he wants to be defense secretary, so that Rumsfeld was hoping to run for president himself, by the way.
Oh.
And so he takes his crony Dick Cheney and promotes him to be chief of staff. And so these two then cause this sort of internal coup d'etat where they force Gerald Ford, who was a moderate, to swing hard to the right. He reverses all of these Nixon policies of détente and so forth to a much more aggressive stance with the Soviets. And so you have a kind of a coup. And that's the same, it's a precursor to what would happen many, many years later under George W. Bush with this same team. So Dick Cheney's been in the picture in this element. You know, there's a kind of a struggle between these two sides, even within the Republican Party, what they call the traders. This is sort of the Rockefeller wing traditionally, who believe in, you know, sort of global trade as the primary engine, and what they call the warriors or the Vulcans, the ones who see a military superiority as the key.
Okay, trader, not traitor.
Trader.
And I want to get these phone calls in, I really do, but I'm thinking of George Herbert Walker Bush and the neocons and the whole PNAC thing, and that he referred to those people as the crazies, and those are the people then that his son seems to have embraced in his administration. What can you tell us about that?
Well, you know, I don't think that the son, George W. Bush, was really that different than the father. I don't think that he was a captive of these people, but I think what we learned was that even the Bushes, I'm not suggesting in Family of Secrets that the Bushes are omnipotent. The Bushes are really, in the final analysis, they are very effective family with incredible staying power, tremendous ambition, and hunger for power. But ultimately, what they are is they're sort of almost peons. They're enablers or lieutenants for much more powerful people, and so there's always pressure on them as well to play ball. So George H.W. Bush was under pressure, which he resisted sometimes when he was president, because there are these factions, you see, and there are elements within the CIA, even though they're doing all these dastardly things sometimes, they're weirdly a kind of a moderating influence over people who want to do much more extreme things. And it was the same thing with W. They were pushing him all the way through, and I don't know if you know this, but I mean, later on in his administration, he started saying no to Cheney because he was getting the advice from his father in that faction that they're just going too far.
And Jim Baker.
Yeah, this doesn't make the father necessarily any better, but they understood what was possible.
808-0810 is the telephone number. Let's go to Juan calling from San Jose. Juan, hi, welcome to KGO. You're on with Russ Baker. Go ahead.
Russ and Pat, thank you for your brilliance and your courage. I would like to talk about the who and the what of the changes that I also saw in President Obama. But first I wanted to preface my statements by saying that, you know, a while ago, I've been on the hold so long, you guys sounded like the audio score of a movie. You can't invent stuff like this. So please get this book into some reputable directors. Now, unfortunately, I'm an observer of the political scene. I thought Obama changed right after he visited the Secret Service and the CIA. That's when I believe his demeanor started changing and his policies started reflecting that. And I've told people, I think there's a shadow government. I think there's something going on. You know, we know about the CIA, what it did to Mossadegh, to in Chile, in El Salvador. If we know of these things, how many things do we not know about?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, there is no question that when Obama came into office, he went immediately and paid obeisance to certain power centers, and only to those centers. He did go to the CIA. He reassured them that there would be no repercussions relating to the allegations of torture. He went to the Pentagon and he offered some reassurances. So very clearly, somebody told him that he had to go and tell these people, you don't have to worry about me. There's no question of that, because he didn't. I don't think he did that with the Department of Education. Certainly not that kind of a reassurance. Also, he made those public statements. You remember where he said, "We're going to move on. We don't want to have recriminations. We don't want to have investigations of all of these policies under Bush."
Yes, and that is one of the things that we found so infuriating. I mean, that's just so ridiculous. How do you do that when you really believe that somebody's engaged in criminality to the point where they take you into an unnecessary and illegal war?
Well, I think he was creating some insurance for himself. He was reassuring these people that he was not going to be a problem for them in that respect.
Unbelievable. 808810 is the telephone number, 808-0810. I'm Pat Thurston. Russ Baker, my guest. The book is Family of Secrets, and you're listening to KGO News Talk 810.